Allen & Company wishes OOIDA and all members a safe, healthy, and joyous holiday season.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Scott Thompson.
Thanks for joining us. Scott here, in for host Mark Rettig on this Tuesday. We've got a full show on the docket, and we'll get to that in a moment. But first, we'll begin with breaking news. First, President-elect Trump has tapped Sean Duffy to be his transportation secretary, and FMCSA has finally come out with its long-awaited broker transparency rule. We'll start there with full coverage. Here's senior correspondent Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Scott. We now know the pick for Transportation Secretary. Former Wisconsin Representative Sean Duffy has been announced as the nominee. We've got Jamie Jones here to talk about this latest announcement from President-elect Donald Trump. Jamie, thanks for coming in.
Hey, you're welcome, Ashley.
What do we know about Sean Duffy?
Well, he's a former member of the House of Representatives. He served from 2011 to 2019, and his primary focus through those 8 years was more on the financial side of things. There wasn't a whole lot of trucking that we could backtrack to quickly after the nomination was announced yesterday or late last night. But there is one item of note. When OOIDA petitioned the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration for an exemption from the electronic log mandate, he was actually one of 25 lawmakers who signed on in support of that move. So that hints to us that he at least has some sense about issues in trucking that may align well with the agenda for reducing mandates and different things like that. And of course, we won't know until fully in office. He will have to go through the confirmation process in the Senate, and we might be able to plant some questions in that confirmation process to find out more about his trucking-related agenda. But really, right now, with as little as we do know about him, it doesn't look like a terrible pick for truckers.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious kind of how the process goes. Just from looking at his resume, it doesn't appear that he has a ton of experience in the transportation industry. But is that concerning, or is that common, or we kind of still don't know?
Well, when you look at the Department of Transportation as a whole, a lot of it is on that investment side, on the infrastructure and things like that. So having that financial background is going to bode well in that space, because it's not a mystery to any of our listeners here. The highways and bridges are in bad shape. Airports are struggling too. There's a lot in that, investment-wise that needs to be happening. So, like I said, from that business end of the Department of Transportation, I think it would serve well. But when you get down to an agency like the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration underneath the DOT, you would want somebody with a strong trucking background who has some idea about what the rules and regulations mean to the men and women on the road. So we'll be watching once we get the DOT seated. Usually they start filling the other lower level agencies like FMCSA. So that's still to come, but that's one that we'll be watching a lot closer.
All right. Now, this was a big news story day. It kind of, when it rains, it pours.
Yes.
The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration announced its notice of proposed rulemaking on broker transparency. This was a long time coming, right?
Yes and no. I mean, the problem's been around forever. The regulation has been on the books forever for broker transparency. What has happened since 2020, when the agency granted a petition from OOIDA to improve that transparency, it actually, if you look at the way the government moves, 4 years isn't that long. It's just that the problem has become so much worse so fast that it feels a lot longer. I mean, it's not at all uncommon to have rulemakings take many, many, many years to get through the process. So this is actually encouraging that the agency is following through with it, and hopefully we can get something done and it's not spiked in a, move by the Trump administration, which is common every incoming presidency. generally puts a pin in any ongoing rulemakings because they want to evaluate it to see if it aligns with their agenda. But this one is just perfecting an existing regulation, and it will definitely give truckers a better opportunity at negotiating fair rates and knowing if they're doing business with a broker that's a valuable relationship.
What were some of the things in the rulemaking that the FMCSA?
Yeah, the big part, and this is one of the things that OOIDA pushed for, is that once the transaction is complete, if the trucking company, truck owner requests the information, it has to be delivered electronically within 48 hours. And that is closing the big end around that brokers have used currently because they're like, sure, you can come see the paperwork. It's not a problem. But they expect you to come to their physical location and look at paper copies. And I don't know who has the time to do that. Yeah. And so that was kind of the ridiculous maneuver that a lot of brokers did, that this proposal would close that loophole.
Is there anything in it is there anything that isn't in it that OOIDA had hoped to see?
Again, it's just perfecting an existing regulation. There's more broker reform needed, but it's not necessarily directly related to the transparency issue. When you start talking about the broker bonds and how those are getting tapped out, and then the broker fraud that's out there, it's fraud week, and so, fraud is a big conversation right now because there are so many just scammers out there, basically posing as brokers, and motor carriers and brokers are suffering because of it. But that is a separate rulemaking. Okay. So this is all back to the transparency. So shippers will have access to it. Motor carriers will have access to this information. So brokers and the ones out there who are taking crazy percentages of the freight rate, if they're taking 60% just for hitting a few buttons, come on.
Yeah.
Who does the work?
Yeah.
Who does the actual work? And so that's where this is really going to benefit it if we can get this through the proposal process and into a final rule. So it's important to know that this will actually, the comment period will go live starting on Wednesday, and it will be a 60-day comment period. This is the opportunity, much like speed limiters, when we had 15,000 comments filed. Every broker horror story you have, get it in there. This is where it's very important to keep FMCSA accountable on this front in perfecting that transparency rule.
All right, wonderful. So definitely get your comments in on that. And I assume OOIDA will be submitting comments as well. Oh,
100%. And we will have a link to help people comment on landline.media. You'll also be able to catch up more at fightingfortruckers.com. We're all over it, so we'll keep you informed.
All right, Jamie, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
That was Landline Magazine editor Jamie Jones. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Ashley. Two stories we'll surely be covering a lot more of here on the show in the days, weeks, and months to come. For updates on both big stories and many others, we've got you covered over on our website, landline.media. Now, for the rest of the show, we've got a lot more coming your way. A little bit later on, we'll look at what the Texas DOT is doing to expand truck parking at safety rest areas along Interstate 35. After that, we'll travel to New Jersey, where there is a renewed effort to overturn the state's electric vehicle mandates, the first of which goes into effect on New Year's Day. And we'll also get the details on a bill vetoed by California's governor that would have required speed assistance technology in vehicles. But coming up next, we're going to be looking at a different form of technology that's now being used by the Colorado State Patrol. Gone are the days when a trucker could hop on the CB radio to warn fellow travelers about hazards on the road. But troopers are now using something called geofencing to do much the same thing. And we'll get the full details from Captain John Hahn of the Colorado State Patrol. All of that coming right up, so stick around. We've got a good one for you today. Landline Now returns right after this short commercial break.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Running on ultra-low sulfur diesel? Stay protected this winter with Howe's Diesel Treat and Diesel Lifeline. Steer clear of gel and ice with North America's #1 trusted brand. Find Howe's products nationwide at select retailers, auto parts stores, truck stops, and on Amazon.com.
When it's time to overhaul your truck engine, help protect it by insisting on a genuine Vibratech TVD crankshaft damper. Heavy duty, absolute premium quality, and they're made right here in the USA. Find a dealer at vibratechtvd.com.
Truckdown.com. Whenever you have a breakdown, you need Truckdown.com. 24/7 access to 40,000 verified heavy-duty repair vendors nationwide.
Truck revived. Deliveries thrive.
Truckdown.com.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now, welcome back. It used to be that truckers could warn their fellow drivers about hazards ahead through the CB radio. But while some people in the industry still use those devices, for the most part, those days are gone. So some state officials are trying out some interesting technology so they can step into that role and warn truckers of what they're facing down the road. The project involves a technology called geofencing. I spoke about what that is and how the state of Colorado is using it with Captain John Hahn of the Colorado State Patrol. I was reading about the Colorado State Patrol planning to send automatic messages to truckers regarding some of the situations that they encounter in the state. Can you explain, first of all, what situations would this system be used for?
So what it's used for is to get relevant, timely messaging to trucks and to drivers in their office, in the truck. We spend a lot of time doing outreach to companies all across Colorado and beyond with safety messages. But the real challenge is we know we have a lot of trucks that come through. Colorado's a crossroads. We have a lot of trucks that come through our state. Interstate commerce is what it is, right? So we have a lot of trucks that come through our state that may not know some of the challenges and the hazards that we have here in Colorado. So the purpose is to try to get them a message that is relevant to them about the road that they're about to drive on or that they're currently driving on that they may not be aware of.
Okay. And what spurred the patrol to consider something like this? Was this spurred by, say, a particular incident or series of incidents?
We've had a couple of incidents here that have made national news involving trucks, but really it's we've been at it for some time in the organization through enforcement and education and outreach. Again, we spent a lot of time with those things, with education, outreach, and enforcement. Really, this was a matter of trying to figure out another way for us to get the message out. We interact with drivers at roadside all the time. We do about 40,000 truck inspections a year in Colorado. And so we spend a lot of time there trying to do education and doing safety education programs, going to companies, going to safety meetings and that kind of stuff. We do a lot of that. So really what sparked this was just becoming aware of this technology that was starting to develop, that was working its way into the marketplace. And we thought, this is a really good way to, if we can reach the driver in the cab of the truck before we have to take enforcement or whatever, that was one of the things. The other thing is that we looked at our crash data. And our crash data is pretty clear, especially if you go talk about the I-70 corridor west of Denver. We have really high instances of crashes and runaway truck events that involve drivers that are licensed outside of the state of Colorado. So while we do a lot of work inside of the state with education and enforcement, how do we get to that driver that's coming here from Arkansas or Florida or somewhere that, maybe has driven in the mountains before. After all, these are professional drivers, but maybe they don't know the specific issues and challenges that we have on our roads here in Colorado. And again, the data just showed that pretty clearly, that high instances of drivers from outside the state that were being involved in crashes and runaway truck ramp events.
Now, this uses a technology called geofencing. And I'm wondering if you can kind of give us an explanation in layman's terms of what that is and what ability it gives the patrol.
Yep, absolutely. So what geofencing is, we, through the vendor that we use for this product, we identify a particular road or a spot on the roadway where we want to send a message. We provide them the latitude and the longitude. And so it's a geographic point. When that truck goes past that point on the road, that message just gets sent automatically to their ELD. So I can't tell you the nuts and bolts behind the scenes. I'm a trooper and not a computer whiz. But we identify geographic points. We say, you know what? All right, on this road segment, we know we have a problem there. Our data shows us we have a problem there. Let's say with speed. And incidentally, that's the biggest issue that we have is speed. So we want to get a speed message to drivers on this road before they get to a place where they can find themselves in trouble on a steep grade, right? So we'll just identify a point back upstream from where that problem area is, such that when they cross that point, it'll pop up. The thing that we also wanted to be really intentional about is not overloading drivers. I know, just myself driving our roads all the time, the messages that you get via road signs and billboards and all of that. We want to be really, really intentional about not overloading folks and being really specific so that, you just cross the state line and you get a message that says slow down. We want to make sure that you get that message when you get to the place where it makes most sense to say, hey, this is a big deal. You need to really pay attention at this point.
Okay. I want to clarify one thing. This is something I read that they said they were going to try and do through the truckers' ELDs or electronic logging devices. Would this also be done through cell phones or just the ELDs?
Just the ELD at this point. So the vendor that we're using, the product that we're using, just communicates with the ELD. The software that it's DriveWise is the vendor that we're using. That software is available on millions of ELDs. It is, you probably know there's a ton of different ELD vendors out there. So that software, it exists kind of like on your cell phone. You buy a new cell phone and there's a bunch of other apps and things on there that you may or may not use. You may or may not know that they're there. So that software, the DriveWise software, exists on those ELDs just kind of in the background. They don't have to subscribe to a service or anything like that. They just have to activate that part of the software that's on their ELD.
I want to ask a devil's advocate question. Colorado has a new law going into effect January 1st, banning handheld cell phone use and requiring hands-free devices. And of course, there's a lot of concern about texting and driving on the part of all drivers. I know within the enforcement community. Does sending truckers text messages through ELDs in any way conflict with that law or its goals?
Well, I mean, certainly the need for any driver to pay attention and focus on the task at hand, driving the vehicle, whatever vehicle that they're in, certainly that takes precedence. And that's why we wanted to be really intentional about not making sure that they're not getting a message every 15 miles that something's going on. So if in the thought process behind it is if they're going along, let's say I-70, and they're approaching the Eisenhower Tunnel. For your listeners and viewers that may know that area, it's a pretty significant downgrade. As they're approaching that particular stretch of road, if they get a chime in the background and a really quick message on their screen, and in fact, for that stretch of road, it's steep grade ahead, gear down, slow down. So sure, we want them to stay focused on the task at hand, but if I can just get them to understand that hey, there's a hazard ahead. You're going into an area where we have problems with trucks crashing due to speed. Let's get you slowed down before you get to a place where it's going to be really hard for you to slow down.
In reading about this, I saw that this technology has already been used in at least one location in Colorado. Where was that, and why was that particular place chosen?
So the first place that we stood up this geofenced message was on I-70 at the Eisenhower Tunnel, or just before the Eisenhower Tunnel. What's that, about, 60 miles or west of Denver. And the reason we chose that is again, we sat down, we looked at our crash data, and specifically the crash data where a CMV is involved and where a CMV was the at-fault vehicle in the crash. And it was pretty clear, number one, I-70 has the highest instances of CMV-caused crashes in the state of Colorado. So we knew right there, it's going to be somewhere on I-70. And then we looked at the mile markers. I think anybody that, especially in the CMV enforcement business, kind of had that gut check. Like, I think I probably know where my problem areas are, but let's look at the data. And so we did. And it turns out that was a really high, an area where we had high instances of crashes, also high instances of runaway truck ramp usage on the Eisenhower tunnel grade. So that's why we chose that. And then we looked at, so we knew where we wanted to put it. And then it became a matter of, well, what's the message going to be? And so then we looked at the accident causal factors. When we do an accident report, our troopers, when they investigate, part of their job is to figure out what caused it, right? And the crash data was pretty clear that speed was a factor. So that's where we came up with the steep grade ahead, gear down, slow down message that trucks will receive on that stretch of road. So that was the first place. We've since, there's another similar message, actually the exact same message on US 160 down in the south central part of Colorado on Wolf Creek Pass. Same thing. We see a spike in crashes going down Wolf Creek, and it's caused by speed. So those were the first two places that we stood up. And since then, we've activated messaging for the winter driving season, just alerting trucks to the fact that they need chains on their truck on basically all of our interstates, Colorado and U.S. highways up in the mountains of Colorado. So that messaging has been activated on I-25, I-70, and I-76 out in the Denver area to alert drivers before they even get up in the mountains.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the results of what you've done so far. Obviously, you have some very specific goals in mind with this technology. How satisfactory have the results been?
So we've been at it for just about a year. And what we're seeing so far is there's very definitely a downward trend in CMV-caused crashes in Colorado. It's about 27%. Reduction in crashes in Colorado where a CMV was involved and the CMV was the at-fault vehicle in the crash. So that's great. That's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to keep people safe and drive down crashes. On the tunnel grade, the other really neat thing about this technology is that we set up two geofences for the speed messaging, one at this point and one at this point, if you will. And what the technology does is it just calculates the speed, what you were doing here, the time and distance between here and here, and it gives me an idea of are we seeing reductions in speed? And what we've seen up at the Eisenhower Tunnel is about a 4.3 mile per hour reduction in speed on average since that messaging has been stood up. So, time will tell. We'll let this run for from this point forward. And so once we get more crash data, I think time will tell how effective it is. But at least in this short term, it looks like we're having some positive results. Crashes are headed the right direction. That is, they're headed down. And we're seeing some reductions in speed in places where we really need folks to slow down.
That was Captain John Hahn of the Colorado State Patrol talking about the patrol's use of a technology called geofencing, along with ELDs, to warn truckers of hazards on the road ahead. After a short commercial break, I'll spend some more time talking with Captain Hahn about the ability of the system to get messages out to people with limited abilities in English and more. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
At Truck Stop, we built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on TruckStop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Landline Now, welcome back. Before the break, I was talking with Captain John Hahn of the Colorado State Patrol, and we were discussing the patrol's use of a technology called geofencing, along with ELDs, to warn truckers of hazards on the road ahead. We now continue that conversation in progress. I wanted to ask a couple of kind of devil's advocate questions. One of them is, we do have a percentage of drivers out there with a limited ability to speak and read English, despite the federal regulations that require that. If we have people who have difficulty reading English, does the system have any way of accommodating that, or is this something that you're looking at?
So it does. At present, the technology will communicate in Spanish and in French to accommodate French Canadian drivers that are coming from the north. Those are the two languages that it can communicate in now. My understanding is that the vendor is working on creating additional language opportunities with it. So a good start in that direction.
Okay. One other kind of devil's advocate question. There are already signs in many areas that you've talked about warning truckers of some of these potential problems, and even some I've seen that advise them specifically to downshift instead of using brakes on some of these steep downhill grades. If the signs that are there aren't doing the job, is this going to be enough to really solve the problem in your mind?
Well, and that's absolutely, and you make a great point there. That's something that we definitely thought about a great deal when going down this path. I think any driver would attest to the fact you drive any road and there are signs all over the place. And of course, we encourage drivers to pay attention. There's a reason why that signage is where it is, whether it's sharp curves ahead or steep grade ahead or whatever the case may be. Please, by all means, pay attention to the signs. But I also recognize that there's a lot of those signs out there. And so part of our thought process for pursuing this technology was, all right, so with all of that signage that's out there, if all of a sudden something pings inside the truck and shows up on their ELD, maybe that's the thing that gets them to go, wait a minute, okay, there's something different here. There's something different here I need to pay attention to. That was very definitely a part of the thinking when we pursued this technology.
I'm kind of curious. Obviously, you're kind of layering on warnings here, trying to get people's attention. And kind of looking ahead, does the patrol think that they may need to look into more of that kind of layering, adding other kinds of warnings? Is this something where you have a specific technology in mind, or are you waiting to see what they come up with next?
We're always looking for opportunities. That's how we ended up where we are with this in-cab messaging here is we're always looking for new ways, any way that we can to get a message across to drivers, and in the context of this conversation, to truck drivers, anything we can do to get the message across to help them be safe is what we're trying to do. And so there may be a technology out there that I don't even know about today. If we believe that there's some promise that may help, and it helps even a couple of crashes or it saves a couple lives, we'll pursue it. Anything we can do to get that message out.
One of the things that came up after one of the particular incidents in Colorado that I think you were kind of pointing to indirectly that did make national news was the fact that the driver involved had no training specifically to deal with some of the situations they encounter in Colorado. And we've reported on the show many times about the fact that there is no time behind the wheel required as part of the federal rules for truck driver training. In the patrol's view, does that need to change?
Well, I think just generally, I would say that any opportunities out there for training, I think, are a good thing. I know in our business and law enforcement, we're always looking for ways, we're always implementing new training to make us better at what we do. I would say that for the most professional, best drivers that we have out on our roads, which is the commercial truck driver, the commercial driver. If there are opportunities out there to sharpen those skills, especially sharpening those skills that have to do with driving in the mountains, that's a good thing.
Well, Captain, that's all I had. I want to thank you very much for your time and for all the information. Hopefully we help some folks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And anytime, I'm happy to chat anytime. I really appreciate you reaching out and helping us get the message out to folks out there to be safe.
That was Captain John Hahn of the Colorado State Patrol talking about the patrol's use of a technology called geofencing, along with ELDs, to warn truckers of hazards on the road ahead. Texas has, for years, worked hard to expand truck parking at the state's safety rest areas. The latest example of that sits along Interstate 35 between Waco and Austin. Near the town of Salado, that's where you'll find what is officially called the Bell County Safety Rest Area. Like many of the Texas rest areas built over the past 20 or so years, it is a large facility with plenty of amenities, and it has an architectural theme. It appears to be a stone building with a large mill wheel on its side. That design, the DOT says, was inspired by a number of grist mills that used to be located in that area along Salado Creek, an official Texas natural landmark. That rest area is in the midst of an update that includes very significant increases in truck parking spaces. I spoke recently with Jake Smith, the public information officer at the Texas Department of Transportation's Waco District Office, about what they're doing near Salado. Let's start with the most recent news. We have some additional truck parking spaces at the Salado rest areas. How many are there, including how many on each side of the highway?
So TxDOT has 4, or in our Waco district, which covers 8 counties, we have 4 safety rest areas, 2 of them being in Salado, or Bell County, on the northbound side and southbound side of Interstate or I-35. Total, we are adding 52 parking spaces on the northbound side and 51 on the southbound side. So you're looking at a total of about, or 81 and 80 truck parking spaces on each given side. So a little over 160 once the project is complete.
Now, for those who aren't familiar with the area or who don't run there, can you describe roughly where this rest area is?
Sure. So the Waco district, or TxDOT, is primarily centered around Waco, Texas, but these rest areas are south of Waco, I would say in between Waco and Austin, Texas.
Okay, on I-35.
Correct.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the cost of these. First of all, what was the total amount to add this truck parking just to these 2 rest areas, the north and southbound there?
Looking about approximately $12 million.
In looking at that, that is a pretty high amount per parking space added. Was there more work included in that amount on those rest areas? What was involved overall and what that money was spent on?
No, so this is just adding parking spaces. There is going to be some work around the rest areas, but the project itself is primarily serving parking spaces or additional truck parking spaces to what's already there.
And I think that maybe is kind of informative to folks who are wondering why there isn't more truck parking. It really does cost a lot of money to add these spaces, doesn't it?
Well, the ultimate goal is just safety. We want to provide these safe areas for truck drivers and in the casual commuter, some respite and rest at these safety rest areas. Primarily during the day, they're used by your typical commuter, or not commuter, but your traveler that's just needs to rest their legs or stretch their legs and maybe head to the bathroom. But with these additional truck parking spots, we are hoping to expand opportunity for these truck drivers to get some meaningful rest as well.
We had talked a little bit just a moment ago about the location of these, and obviously TxDOT and a lot of the other state agencies are trying to be strategic in where they place additional truck parking spaces. Why was there a particular need at that location for this amount of additional truck parking?
Well, like you said, these safety rest areas are strategically located. The ones that we oversee, or at least are in our area, the 4 locations, all of them are along I-35 in Texas. And I-35 is considered one of the most important arteries in our state, certainly for commerce and transportation needs. And so it only makes sense to add these truck parking spaces to these established areas that TxDOT has.
Well, I know that some Texas rest areas are really well known for having very good facilities and amenities for people who stop there. And I'm wondering what the case is at the Salado rest areas. What sort of amenities, what sort of services or facilities are available for people who use that particular set of rest stops?
The Salado rest areas are really an attractive and appealing spot to just take a stretch, get some rest. They have bathroom facilities, snacks, and a little bit of a playground for the kiddos. These rest areas, not just the ones that we're talking about here, but statewide, really aim to be sort of a premier destination for rest and getting some shut-eye or just taking a break from your long drive.
Now, Texas has a lot more territory than any of the other lower 48 states, which is pretty common knowledge. And a lot of the state is rural. As someone who looks at the parking situation there, what sort of challenges does that present to the state DOT in trying to accommodate truckers' parking needs?
Well, like I said earlier, the ultimate goal is safety. And any expansion is aimed towards providing opportunity for truckers, for long range drivers, certainly safe haven from the moving lanes of a freeway, and certainly encouraging drivers, truck drivers, long range drivers to get off the highway, get into a safe area away from moving traffic, and take your rest there in a safe space so you can get to your destination safely.
When do we expect the project to expand the truck parking in Salado to be complete?
We anticipate this project to complete end of next year.
So a little while to get that into place.
Correct. But there will also be minimal impact on your day-to-day operations at the Salado rest area. So while that is continuing, the project will be ongoing.
That was Jake Smith, the Public Information Officer at the Texas DOT's Waco District Office, talking about a project to increase the amount of truck parking at a rest area along Interstate 35. You can keep up on the latest truck parking news at the website landline.media, and you can also read about the topic in the pages of Landline magazine. Again, the website is landline.media. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. Please stay with us through a short commercial break. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Capital Reman, the leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, has partnered with OOIDA to offer exclusive member benefits. Visit capitalreman.com today to support America's transportation industry and take advantage of your benefits.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back to Landline Now. Election season is finally behind us, which means we can now turn our attention to what state lawmakers are doing with regard to transportation issues. Today, our focus turns to New Jersey and electric vehicle mandates, and to California, where the conversation about speed assistance technology has hit a dead end. Joining us with the details, Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine. Keith, thanks for joining us.
Scott, thanks for having me. Yes, we are in the post-election, not funk. But if you like elections, I guess you're kind of happy.
All right. Well, let's not fall into a funk ourselves here. We'll talk about New Jersey here, and actually, the two topics we're talking about today do kind of tie into one another, and we'll kind of weave that story together.
It's funny
as
how
we
that
go.
happens.
It does. Yeah. It's almost like it was planned by somebody. So New Jersey is one of the states that is instituting these emission standards that we've seen kind of modeled in California. New Jersey has established mandates, but resistance, it appears, is building in the State House. What's going on there?
Yeah, well, you've got lawmakers in New Jersey who don't like the fact that they've been bypassed for implementation of these vehicle standards that come courtesy of California. Specifically talking about in New Jersey, their Department of Environmental Protection, they adopted the California standards for both advanced clean trucks and advanced clean cars. Worth noting that in New Jersey with the advanced clean trucks electric vehicle mandate, it's got a January 1st, 2025 implementation date. Now, the advanced clean cars mandate is 2 years later in 2027. But yes, you've got state lawmakers, a couple of Senate Republicans there in New Jersey that are wanting to have legislative hearings on the mandates. Again, not really appreciative of the fact that these standards coming via California are being implemented in New Jersey without giving stakeholders and the state legislature an opportunity to really have a say on whether or not this actually happens.
So what does that look like? Because as you mentioned there, the Advanced Clean Trucks regulation is scheduled to go into effect on January 1st, 2025. So we're about less than a month and a half away from that. What does this opposition effort look like, and do they have time to do it, I guess, is a big question.
Yeah, well, what it looks like is, they're wanting to, they've got two bills that would delay implementation of the regulations, specifically, I guess the focus being on truck regulations because, again, we're right around the corner. Wanting to delay that until January 2027, so it would coincide with, the car standards taking effect, again, 2 years from now. Both of the bills, there's a Senate version and there's an Assembly version, which the idea behind that is you allow lawmakers in both chambers to start discussing legislation without having to have one chamber. With one bill, you'd have one chamber would have to discuss it, approve it, pass it, and then folks on the other side of the State House would then take the issue up, what they're trying to do. And is the case with a lot of bills in New Jersey is that you've got an Assembly version and you've got a Senate version, and you got lawmakers on both sides of the State House that can discuss the legislation and hopefully, if you're supporting it, approve it and get it moving forward at the same time, and obviously make it a much more condensed time frame as far as getting something passed. But again, there's not a lot of time left.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to say about this necessarily, if this has got a chance at passage. But you never know, especially as we get down to the wire in New Jersey. They're in session all year, so they might approve this thing at the end of December. But it's going to be, it's going to be interesting.
And this is a conversation that we're going to hear kind of echoed in other states. I think there are 10 states to adopt California's truck rule specifically. We are seeing some opposition in other states. I assume you're following that as well.
Yeah, I obviously not alone. Quite a few states have taken action to adopt the California truck rule. And about an equal number almost, it seems, are saying, well, hold on.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're quite ready for this yet. There are concerns out there. And, there's obviously federal challenges to this rule as well. So what comes in the months ahead, it'll be interesting to see if this changes things.
Let's shift all of our focus to California now, which got this whole thing started. And speaking of mandates, we previously covered a bill that would have made speed assistance technology a requirement in new cars and trucks sold in the state. Before we get into the latest, and we'll certainly talk about that, I want to make sure that we know what we're talking about here. These are not speed limiters, but kind of more like a cousin, right?
Yeah, as it was introduced, this legislation, again, that we're talking about, as it was introduced, it called for essentially a speed limiter. So you couldn't go above, I believe it was like more than 10 miles per hour over the posted speed. You would be limited as it was introduced as a Senate bill. And there was support for that, but there was concern about the fact that it would ultimately meet its demise because there are some factors that might come into play that would make having a speed limiter potentially a safety issue. And obviously, those in the trucking industry are familiar with this, but the public at large, not familiar with it. So getting that kind of insight there at the State House initiated some reworking of the legislation by the bill sponsor, recognizing that, okay, that's probably not going to get approved. So in exchange for having a speed limiter, putting in place a passive system, which you see in some vehicles. Some vehicles have them, not just trucks or anything like that, but a lot of passenger vehicles have technology that will give the driver a heads up, whether it's an audio or some sort of visual heads up, or in some cases, some vehicles might have their driver's seat will kind of like jostle a little bit to kind of give you a little bit of a heads up that something's going on you might need to be mindful of. In this case, it would be a notification that you had exceeded the speed limit by at least 10 miles per hour, and it would give you some sort of signal that you need to slow down.
Good explanation, but it's a moot point because the governor, Gavin Newsom there in California, vetoed this bill. Why, I guess, is a big question.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was kind of like partially expecting the governor to authorize this, but in the end, he had some concerns about traffic safety and that this particular effort could present multiple challenges. One of the ones that was highlighted was multiple challenges there for the state, I guess I should say, is pointing out that federal law that it already regulates, vehicle safety standards, and by putting in this California specific requirement, could create a patchwork of regulations that could be an issue as far as the federal framework goes. Which I guess if you were to take a step back and you were to think of some of the legislative efforts or even things that have been proposed there by California agencies that other states have even looked at that create a bit of a patchwork of regulations. Anyway, it was interesting to see the governor use that perspective as justification for vetoing this legislation. But yeah, that was one of the points that he made. Also pointing out that that National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, they're actively evaluating these intelligent speed assistance systems. So wanting to essentially hit the pause button on implementing this sort of standard in California.
We're going to hit the pause button as well, Keith, for today's show, but we do appreciate you stopping by and talking with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
And that is our show for today. We thank you for listening, and from all of us here at Landline Now, take care and drive safe.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
My kids.
Chrome. And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together, we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us.
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.